Hello, my dear art nerds. Today we're going to be doing something fun with Sharpies, so keep watching. Today, my friends, I felt like I was in the mood for a challenge. And what better challenge, especially since so many people have requested that I do more alcohol marker videos. What better challenge than a Sharpie marker challenge? So we've got two different packs here. We've got the 24 pack, and then we've got the 2016 or 2017 limited edition pack with the new colors. And I'm going to also be using some 300 series Strathmore artist tiles today. And I went ahead and I swatched the colors. And let me divide them up. So these are the new color swatches, and I'll put them into the light, and these are the original swatches. And I tested for a couple different properties. I tested layerability, and I will have scans of these over at nattosoup.blogspot.com if you're really interested. And I also tested out blendability using a Copic Chow. However, my Copic Chow is running low and I don't have any refills, so I went out and I picked up a Prismacolor blender, and hopefully that will work. As you guys can see, there is some reactivity, so there is a little bit of blending that is possible with Sharpie markers. And I also went ahead and I drew an adorable little Aster fairy, and I did that using the Strathmore artist tiles. That's why those are in the frame. So we're gonna go ahead and get coloring today. So for those of you who are drawing along and you're curious what the difference is between the two packs, I marked the colors that are not available in the 24 pack here on my 21 color selection. What I would recommend is, if you want the most colors possible, I'd get the 24 pack, and then I would pick up a couple of the bonus packs. I think it's like neon colors is one of them, and then there maybe like 80s pop colors is the other one, and I would not get them at Michael's because they are vastly overpriced over there. Okay, so this illustration has been inked with a Sakura of America Pigma FB. And I want to do something with the background first. So, I know this looks like a bright green, but it is not that bright. I'm going to go ahead and try to get the background. And I know this is kind of an ambitious illustration. And I'm just really trying to get a background fill in, and it's probably going to end up taking a while. And for those of you who are curious as to whether or not Sharpies are really a good replacement for your average alcohol marker like Copic or Prismacolor or what have you, I would say absolutely not. They are not archival. They have very strong fumes, and the tips are pretty terrible. So this is more of a fun challenge than an endorsement. I wanted to see if I could do it, but I am certainly not saying you should do it. And I'm trying to be careful, and I'm still getting outside the lines. Now, in terms of affordability, if you're looking for some good options that are still inexpensive, I would definitely recommend you check out the Blick Studio brush markers before you decide to sink in and get a pack of Sharpies. Alright, so as you guys can see, that's going to take a little while. I'm going to go ahead and use my brand new and very full Prismacolor, and I'm gonna knock that green back, or at least try to get out. I'm not super concerned about all the streaks. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and fill in the rest of the background, and I'm gonna do that off camera so that I don't waste your time or mine. Just wanted to demonstrate a tip for filling in a larger area a little more quickly. You want to do this away from the skin, and we're using the side of the Sharpie, and you definitely want to have something underneath that can kind of protect, and you're just doing it in sort of a long streak motion. Like that. So this has been filled in. I'm gonna go into this as well and blend some of that back a little bit. It does seem to also react to Prismacolor markers. This is just my first layer, I think. I'm also going to knock some of that color back on some of these leaves. And I'm doing that with a Prismacolor marker. Very juicy Prismacolor marker too. It's like no one bothered to molest it in the store. It's impressive. Okay, so next I want to do her skin, and the skin is a bit of a problem because you see it's kind of this weird beigey color. There isn't anything really lighter than that, and when we knock it back it gets to be this even weirder sort of pink. So that is something I'm going to have to be careful about. And I think what I'm going to try to do is mostly just get the shadows on her skin and try to utilize the white of the page as well. Let's see how successful I can be with this. See, I would make her darker skinned, but between this sort of beige color, and maybe that's the direction I'm actually going to end up going, is making her darker skinned, because it seems like this weird pinky beige is just not really the best color if we're blending out to white. But maybe if our intention is not to blend out to white, but to get darker, we might end up with something kind of nice. We'll see. And I'm going to work on rendering discrete zones, so parts of the face that have been sort of bounded off. Okay, so we have some highlights left on her face. Now, grabbing, and I'm going to try to get, there's some green in it, I'm going to try to get that out. Grabbing our Prismacolor, I'm going to try to knock some of this color back. Just so that the transition isn't too harsh. And then I'm going to move on to kind of the next zone of skin. And I am sure this will look kind of hot mess. And I'll just have to blend it out and deal with it as it comes up. After all, it is a challenge, and the whole point of challenges are for them to be challenging. So next I'm working on the neck. You guys can kind of see what I mean when I said discrete zones. And part part of what makes these hard to use is the nibs have no give and they feel very dry and scratchy. So I'm trying to cover a large area quickly so I don't get too much streaking, but also kind of cover it well. All right, blend that out a little bit. Move on to the next arm. And I think I'm going to have to keep everything I do very simple. Now there are Sharpie markers with a brush nib. I actually reviewed those, I think, in either early 2016 or 2015, and I will link them right here. And I've also done, I've written about Bic markets before as sort of a baby's first alcohol marker. But I am a firm believer that rather than buying permanent markers and trying to use those like alcohol markers, you should just invest in some inexpensive alcohol markers, because I find that the fumes from permanent markers are really intense. And I might end up getting a little loopy on this video because I can already kind of tell that I'm inhaling a lot of fumes just talking to you guys and coloring with these. Okay, so try to knock it back some more because I want to be able to build up contrast, and from my initial tests, these markers don't layer the way a lot of alcohol markers will, where you can get a lot darker tones by layering them. Something that's fun about these challenge videos is figuring out how to take something that isn't designed for this purpose and making it work. One of the most fun aspects. And I recently did a makeup challenge where I took what I learned from using pan pastels to make the makeup work. And these are fun because I can take what I've learned from cheap alcohol markers that I've reviewed for years and put it to work here. And so far I'm not as dissatisfied as I thought I would be. Now, usually when I'm talking about alcohol markers, I will bring up how to get sharp transitions and how to get smooth transitions. And smooth transitions come, or you can achieve smooth transitions when you are working basically wet in the wet, when the alcohol hasn't yet evaporated from the paper and it's the colors are blending on the paper immediately, and you get hard transitions when you've allowed the first layer to dry and you're applying the new layer on top of it because it's less likely to blend. Now with the Sharpie markers, that is a bit different because they are so dry feeling. In fact, I've told you guys before that you're more, even with like a marker proof ink, you're more prone to smearing if your marker is dry. And I'm getting a little bit of smearing down there because these are they're they're very new. They still have a lot of ink in them, but they're very dry on the paper. And next, I want to try to do some blush. Unfortunately, I just don't really have any colors that seem to lend themselves to that. I have two pinks from both sets. This is from the new set, this is from the old set. And this pink is kind of a lighter pink, and this pink is more of like a skin tone salmony pink. And I want to do it at this stage because I can layer on top of it or maybe blend it out. Try it on the lips first and see what I get, since it's less noticeable if lips are a little darker. Now, something else. Okay, so it can be blended out somewhat. So I'll try it under her neck and blend it out. Under her nose, and I have to be careful because these Sharpies want to smear the line art. And then normally I go big when it comes to cheek blush, but I'm gonna go a little subdued this time and hopefully end up with something that works. And then do the inside of her ears. Tops of her eyes. So far it's working. Using all of our problem solving skills. To end up with something that does work. And normally I would recommend, like let's say we were using water-based markers, I would say to achieve what we're trying to do with this, you should apply it to a piece of scrap plastic, but since these are so dry, I don't know if that would really work very well, because we're basically using the Prismacolor color. We would be using the colorless blender here to sort of pick it up and apply it elsewhere. All right, next I want to do a little bit of shade to her eyes. So I'm trying to find a blue that I think will work for that. So I am looking at the 21 pack. I think that color there will work. And I try to swatch in the order that they are in the pack because it allows me to better select colors. And I'm just going to do a line at the top of her eye. And really try to push it back with this colorless blender without that polluting the skin. Then a line at the top of that eye, and do the same then I'm going to work on her dress. So I want the flowers in the background to be asters, and I was sort of thinking of doing asters in the foreground. I have plenty, and one of the reasons I went with asters is I have a lot of purple tones that I can choose from for this. I just have to make sure they're in the same color, sort of color gamut. And I also want it to kind of pop off of the ones in the background. So it might even be smarter to do the ones in the background and then do the ones in the foreground. So I've got 2 purples here. And again, we're working in kind of discrete zones where it would be less noticeable if there were streaking. And looking at how dark this purple is, I think I want something much lighter on her dress. And I found an area that I have to go back into with green. All right, I'm gonna go and do that to all the other flowers. Actually, I said that and I just realized I'd actually rather do the sky. So using the same blue I used to shade her eyes, we're gonna try to do this carefully because I don't think I can do a very good job on the sky, but we're gonna try. So using long continuous strokes, I'm basically coloring in the darkest part of the sky, and I'm not going to color it all the way down either. And I'm also kind of cheater pumpkin eater working my way around the forms. And then I'm going to take my colorless blender. I'm going to work my way up into the sky. Still working kind of around those forms. Right now it looks like it's making the color darker, but it's really just because that area is wet. Okay. And I'm gonna grab my green again and go ahead and fix this while I'm thinking about it. And the part in that aster. There we go. And then we're gonna take our blue and we're gonna do another layer on top of it. So, starting at the top, those long, continuous lines. Can't say brush strokes because we're not working with a brush, not even a brush tip. And we're basically creating kind of a gradient sky. And then I'm going to take my colorless blender again, and starting from the bottom, blend up into it. That way we don't end up with some areas that have a lot of colorless blender and some areas that don't. I mean, that might happen anyway because that's sometimes just the nature of human error, but trying to avoid it. We also have to consider that since we're doing a challenge video and we're working with unusual materials, we need to adjust our expectations of the materials accordingly. You can't expect Sharpies to work like other types of alcohol markers without testing and finding out first. And two, it really helps if we keep what we're doing, if we keep the techniques we're doing kind of simple. So going in. And just darkening up the top. And I'm noticing my Sharpie really wants to catch on the edge of the paper. Okay, so that is what our sky looks like. I don't think it's the worst sky I've ever seen. So I'm going to go ahead now and color in those other asters. All right, so the basics for all of the asters have been colored. I'm going to go ahead and go in with a sunny yellow. And I'm sure I'm going to wreck color havoc. But I'm just sort of dabbing that yellow in and trying to leave a white highlight. And I'll zoom in so you guys can see me do it on this one. Okay, so we still need to work on actually a couple different things. We need to work on the top part of her dress, and I grabbed this very bright green. Actually, that's the wrong very bright green. This very bright green from the set that has the new colors in it. I'm going to use this as a base because I do want her to seem to pop from the background. And this is a much brighter green than the green we used in the background. And I'm trying to keep my marker movements flowing in the same direction as the forms I'm rendering. Right, set that aside. Gotta remember to keep everything kind of segregated from each other because I don't want to grab the wrong colors. And I'm gonna grab, I think, this light purple. And color this top part of her dress. All right, and now that I've got that colored, I've got my Prismacolor. And I'm going to go in and basically knock all of that back. The whole time I'm trying to be really careful to follow the forms of the flower. So able to knock it back quite a bit. Now I'm going to turn it over and do, I think, the same thing to the lower part of her dress. And I'm going to do the same thing. And you'll note that I made sure it was really irregular, just like it would be in a real flower. And I am being kind of irregular in where I apply the blender to for the same reason. Okay. So, do want to do a little bit over here and then over here. But then I'm going to switch back over to the skin for a while. I'm not done with her dress, but I have to keep in mind that, actually, this is not bad paper for these markers, but I have to keep in mind that there's only so much I can do in certain areas at a time. So I'm going back to that color we designated as our skin tone. And I'm going to begin knocking in the shadows. It's really more like drawing them in. And for this, I probably will not. Actually, you know what? I'll test it under her neck. We'll see, and if it doesn't work, then it's only in one area. So while I'm doing all that, oh yeah, nah, looks like she's got a beard going on now. I used the same purple I did in her dress. Gonna knock that color down a bit, which is gonna actually knock her whole neck down a bit. So I'm gonna knock that also. And that way it's consistently sort of pushed back. We'll let that dry. Come in and do her face. Now I wish this marker wasn't so scratchy. Some people kind of have like a domino mask. It's like a easy little shading hack, I guess you could call it. So kind of like Batman and Robin, like Robin's mask, right? That's a domino mask. So people have like that sort of area shaded in. It tends to be recessed in the face. I'll use a little bit of blender just to knock it back by her nose. Mostly just doing cast shadows. Entire inside of her ear. Underside of the nose. I'll soften that a little bit with colorless blender. even on the lips. Okay, so that's basically what we've got, which isn't bad. Neck. This is where it's gonna get kind of hard for me. So I have to start making some judicious decisions. So I think I'm gonna work on the rest of her skin in off camera. So with this, I basically did one layer over it and blended it out. I think I can maybe get a third layer out of that color. So I'm gonna let it dry, and I'm going to pull out this green. This is the same green that is in the background grass. And I'm going to go ahead and color in these under leaves on her bodice. And then I'm going to go over it with the same brighter green that I'd used for the top part. Okay, and then grab this. And hopefully I'll kind of lighten the color. Also going to use it to do another layer on the bodice. It's a little bit hard to get the clean delineations I want because these markers are really scratchy. I guess that's the type of nib they use. But I also think Sharpies, at least there's certain types of Sharpies that are designed to, starting to smear that ink, even if they've been left uncapped, they don't dry out, and that's probably due to a combination of the ink and the nib working together. Can't say that for, say, Copic markers. So, you know, different markers have their definite selling points. So I'm going to go in with this dark purple. Well, it's not really a dark purple, it's more like a lavender, and fill in the underside of the dress. And then I'm gonna do her wings, and I've decided that I want to do monarch style wings. So I'm gonna start with a yellow, and I'm just gonna fill the whole thing in with yellow. So I'm just gonna use sort of long strokes. Hopefully it won't smear the black too much. And once I have finished filling it in with yellow, then I can start working with the orange. And I am going to want some interblending of the colors. So I'm going to have to figure out how to do that because the markers themselves don't interblend too well. The nib is just too dry and too scratchy for that, really. There's just not enough ink going down on the paper. So I'm going to have to figure out something else. So I'm going to go ahead and finish filling it all in. Alright, I've got the whole base color filled in. There aren't a lot of choices when it comes to orange. I'm going to grab one from the 24 pack and just do a fill in on this wing on top of that yellow. Try to stay in the lines. It's actually harder for me to stay in the lines with these stiff nibs. I think I'm used to them being kind of wibbly wobbly on me. And you guys might notice that I've basically been filling everything in kind of at the same pace, trying to work from large areas to smaller areas in general, but also taking into consideration areas that are going to need a lot of blender and trying to get those done early. And the reason I'm trying to get those done early is because sometimes the blender will affect adjacent areas, and that's a big pain in the butt to correct if you've already filled in the color. So that's one. Let's do the smaller wing in the back, and I'm going to let those dry. I'm also a little concerned that even though they're alcohol markers and they evaporate very quickly from the paper surface, unlike water-based markers, the stiffness of the nib might have a chance to abrade the paper. So I do want to be wary of that. Next, I'm going to use this lavender purple, and I'm just going to start working on the top of the dress like this. Same thing I was doing earlier, except I'm adding kind of another layer to it. A little bit hard to get the control I want because I'm doing this on the floor, so I kind of have my elbow compressed. I would recommend you guys do this at a table if you want to follow along. Give yourself plenty of room to work. It's got actually a nice effect. I bet you could beat these markers up enough to where you'd get some flex out of the nib. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here. I think that makes for a pretty nice effect. I'm gonna go in again with colorless blender, try to get the right tip this time. See, it's never going to be kind of a perfect transition between the white and the purple, but hopefully I can kind of make it look a little more intentional. And we do have to keep in mind the materials we're using. And I do actually want to try using the purple because the way it turned out under her neck seems like it would work really well here where her legs cross, so there might be a leg in shadow, and then I need to knock that back with the colorless blender as well. And I want to do the whole leg, and then over here where it sort of is underneath the dress, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to knock that back with colorless blender as well. Even if you want to do this challenge too, definitely helps to have a blender marker on hand. So I'm going to give that a chance to, actually I'm going to go ahead and go into it again with that skin tone-y color. And hopefully that'll kind of help blend it. And I'm really trying to use the conical side of the marker more than the tip of the marker. Gives me a wider mark so I can fill the area in a little quicker. I actually want a little more purple over here. Okay, let us see. So next, I think I want to do her hair, and I know she's a fairy, so I could get away with doing something kind of crazy, but I feel like that would really be a hard sell with her skin tone. So I guess I want to do this dark brown. And I'm not even going to try to do a mid-tone because I don't even think there's anything really good in between. I'm a little also concerned that if I blend it out, it might get weird. But, there's really only one way to find out, and that is through taking a risk and experimenting. Zoom in for you guys. And at least using something this dark is going to give us a lot of pop against her wings. And since there's so many teeny tiny kind of finicky areas, I really need to be careful with this. just sort of take my time. And I definitely want to take the opportunity to caution you guys about the fumes again, because they are basically, oh, I'm off camera. Let me fix that. Sorry about that. Basically all up in my face. So you want to try and work in a well-ventilated area where you can see what you're doing. You don't have to be on top of it to see what you're doing. You want plenty of fresh air. Otherwise, they might start to make you nauseous or something. I don't know, making me kind of nauseous. But I'm also leaning over to color this, so that could be it. But I definitely want you guys to learn from my mistakes and make good choices. Speaking of good choices, I scanned this line art because I really thought she was cute, and she is turning out cute, but you know how it is when you're doing these challenges. You never really know how the end product is going to look. So I scanned her, and I'm going to put the Gumroad up, the line art up on my Gumroad for patrons to download for free. Set that up. And for people who like the line art to pay a very small price. And you guys can download it and work along if you want, or use it for some other coloring project. Just make sure you give me credit for the line art and we're good. Okay. Trying to leave a reflective highlight. And then blend it out a little bit. And then get this little curly Q down here. All right, so you can set that aside and then get back to working it with orange and yellow. So I've got yellow in my hand, and up here at the top, I'm going to try knocking that orange back a bit by putting some yellow on top of it. That would work with Copics. It looks like it do not work with Sharpies. So clean some of that brown out, and we'll use the blender to knock some of that back instead. And then over here, does giving it another coat make a difference? No. All right, this is such a learning opportunity, isn't it, guys? So let's use the orange on top of the yellow, fill most of it in, and then use the Prismacolor to sort of knock that orange back a bit. Can always add more yellow on top of it. We're just going to have to create our own blends that way. So I'm going to do that with the whole wing. I think that turned out rather well, don't you guys? So I'm going to go ahead and do another layer of orange in here. And I'm trying to sort of feather it in, since I can't exactly blend it in, and I can't use the yellow to blend it in either. And I'm kind of saving these asters for the end because they're so little and they're so fiddly. I feel like even though I'm being really careful around them, I still think they're gonna end up getting color in them. So I'm waiting until the end to deal with them. And I think I also want to use, that's actually a really nice transition. I think I want to use a red. So I think I might grab one of the brighter reds. Yes, the bright red from the limited edition 21 colors, new colors. And you guys should know that those new colors aren't just new colors. That's why I bought the set initially. And I am strongly considering giving the set away after this challenge video so that it can go to a home where somebody can actually use it. And let's see if I can maybe do some blending with the orange. Not super much. I guess that means I have to grab my trusty dusty colorless blender. At least the nice thing about this is I can always go over it again with the orange to get the color I want. I'm going to do the same thing on this wing down here. I'm trying to feather it in. And I think the reason these don't blend into one another super well is they're just not wet enough. There's just not enough liquid going on for that to really be a factor. All right, and then that colorless blender, and it's already pushing the prior color back, but like I said, we can always go back into it with our orange. And then I'm going to color these over again in yellow, since the yellow got pushed back. And then I'm going to go over them with orange. So really, Sharpies handle more like water-based markers that you're using with a blender like a Tombow ABT or the Sakura Koi blender. Then they really act like alcohol markers. So it's kind of handy that I have experience with those other types of markers that I can utilize in this challenge, because I really enjoy when we do videos where we can solve the problem instead of just end up with a hot mess. The piece doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be good, but I want to have learned how to handle the material or been able to use prior knowledge from other experiments, other reviews, in order to make something that kind of works. And I really don't normally do bright colors like this, but I love how bright and fun and spring the colors are. This is really, for me, because winter really makes me depressed, this is a good winter timepiece because it's very bright and colorful. And it was actually specifically drawn to kind of go with the Sharpie colors that I have. And then I'm gonna go in here with the orange. And just kind of using little scrubby motions. I don't know if you guys can see what I'm doing, so I'll mega zoom for you guys. And unfortunately, my camera's not picking up the colors, but the colors are really nice. But I'm just sort of trying to feather it in. little bit of the red down here. And then I'll use colorless blender. Knock that back. And we can do another layer on top of that after that has had a chance to dry. So I'm gonna grab this darker purple. And that is not as blue purple as I would have wanted. Maybe I have something kind of in between. But I'm basically doing another layer of color up here on her bodice. And like I said, it's not really the color I wanted. But maybe it'll dry okay. And then I kind of want to knock it back a little bit, but I don't want to knock the color itself back. So I'm going to hold off. Let's see, actually I probably could have used this dark blue. Oh yeah, that's a much better match. So I'm actually going to do that on top of that purple. And I'm just kind of being delicate and taking my time. Trying to do a variety of marks because we have such a stiff nib, we don't really have a lot of options, so gotta kind of change up what side we use and how we hold the brush and how quickly we make marks. Just really gotta try and be inventive, which is also what these challenges are all about, right? Being inventive. So I'm gonna color the underside of her dress. I want to leave some of it lighter. And I'm going to hit that with the the colorless blender, of course. And then for her shoes, I think I want them to be the same color as her bodice. Since we have so many colors going on, I do want to try and limit them. And then I want to do something kind of different. I'm going to grab, actually I want more of a blue-green. So I've got this one right here. I'm just going and then we're going to grab, again, the colorless blender. And then, we're going to give this another coat into the area that had been affected by colorless blender. And then, actually, all the way into the area that had been affected by colorless blender. Yes. And then, we're going to go back into it with this. And at least it gives us somewhat of a gradient. It was probably too much to expect a true gradient, but it gives us somewhat of a gradient. And considering we're doing this in Sharpie, I'm pretty impressed by what I've been able to get done, so. wanted to get a lot more of that colored. And then once that dries, I'm going to go in with like a differenter green, and then we want to do another layer on her hair. Okay, then I want to do her eyes, and I think I want to start with, I've got teals from a couple of different sets. So I'm going to start with the lighter teal from the 24 set, and then do the darker teal from the Now with New Colors set. I'm also going to try to push it back a little bit, maybe get some interesting effects. We'll see. Okay. Sure. That transition is too harsh, so I'm going to knock all of that back and then recolor it. But we're getting really close, and that makes me happy. Oh yeah, this can turn out pretty cool. With these challenges, I don't always get to say that, and I'm going to use this bright blue. All right. And go over it with that green again. Yes, good. And let's see. This might not dry impressively darker, but we'll find out in a minute. Doing the same down here. Looking good, looking good. And also on the soles, but we're gonna leave a little bit. Okay. And then I said I wanted to go back in and recolor some of this. Still mostly just using the side of the nib. Not happy that it somewhat smears marker proof ink, but you know, I'm not going to be using Sharpies as my daily driver anyway. So now it's time to start thinking about that background. There's so much in it. But what have we got? What have we got? We've got 2 greens. Let's make some room. Shove it all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just kind of filling in some areas maybe with this lighter green. Oh, it's pretty scratchy though, so gotta be careful. And I don't want to do the whole thing like this necessarily. Just enough to start knocking in light and dark areas in the grass so that's not so much just a color fill. I mean, not that there's, given the limitations of what we're doing today, a color fill isn't really the worst thing I could do, but we've also sort of, in my opinion at least, pushed my boundaries for what I thought I could do with these materials. So it's also kind of a shame just to leave it at a color fill when we've already done such a nice job. And then of course, it doesn't mean it's going to dry much darker anyway. That's why we actually grabbed the other marker. I just do want some variation if I can get it and not have to sacrifice too much for it. So you guys have basically gotten the idea for how I'm going to do the lighter color. So I'm going to do the rest of the image like that and check in with you guys. Alright, so I've got that first layer of grass done. It was done with this. And I added some up here and blended it out a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of this yellowish green to some of the leaves because I want them to stand out a little bit more. I don't want too much because I don't want them to stand out as much as her bodice stands out, but I do want them to sort of stand as individual elements. I also think I want to go in with maybe a dark blue-green. I don't necessarily have, maybe I do. Maybe I do here, either of these two. And let's see, that is, this set off camera, which I've already kind of disemboweled. So I am totally confused about what colors those are. But I think it is this and that. So starting with this, I'm going to go ahead and, oh, this tip is very sharp, so mostly going to get very fine lines. But I'm going to add some of this darker green in. And another nice thing about these challenges is that even if I am not successful, I've learned a lot, and that's something I can take away and maybe use successfully in a nicer piece. So even if it doesn't work today, we've still learned something for tomorrow. And that makes these challenges a lot more fun. Of course, I wouldn't want them to be the bread and butter. Oh, I just drew right through her finger there. Wouldn't want them to be the bread and butter of this channel either, because they're fun as a sometimes treat, not fun as an all the time treat. Anyway, I'm going to try doing this whole treatment and kind of finagle it for the whole background. And I'll check in with you guys once I have that done. So this is what we've got so far. I don't think it looks bad at all. I think that's definitely helped. I'm going to go in again with that lighter green in some areas and try to darken them a little bit, because I'm kind of trying to build up contrast so everything isn't kind of the same value. Fumes from these markers are definitely already getting to my throat. Then, when I'm done with this, I think I'm going to do something similar with the darker marker. Because I know this isn't really going to dry dark enough. So I'll just go ahead and start with it. And this is a stiffer marker, so it's not going to be easy. But I do think when I'm finished with it, it's really going to have, or at least I really hope it'll have the effect I'm intending. And it's probably going to be a whole lot of back and forth between the two until I hit what I'm looking for. See, my problem is I keep going into her skin, and there's just really not much way for me to fix that. Let me see what I can do, though. Might not work. Then I did it again up there on her arm. That will probably not have the intended effect, but we can hope. Okay. And then I think maybe some down here. But it's definitely helped with the contrast and helped push her out as an object of interest, which is really what my intention was. All right, I think that works. Gonna try and get another layer of value onto her skin. I don't know if that will work. I mean, it looks nice and darker when it's fresh, but then it doesn't dry dark enough. Okay, looking pretty good. So I'm gonna start on the asters in her hair. Finally, we're gonna do the centers first, and I'm just kind of dabbing the yellow in. Then I'm going to working from the center. Actually, I can zoom in for you guys. Right, then we grab our blender All right, so going to do a little bit of orange in the center of the asters. Going to do another layer on the hair asters, which you guys can see doing this. Well, maybe you can't. Let me zoom in. You can see doing this actually makes it look like there's a little bit of a sunlight reflection on the flowers. That's why I do it the way I do it. Okay, then another layer on the big asters. So do you guys prefer challenge videos where the person doing the video walks you through all their decisions, good and bad, and explains what they're doing, or do you prefer them as time-lapse pieces? I personally, I'm totally open to your suggestions, that's why I'm asking. I prefer when they walk me through it and they explain why they're doing what they do, because there's often a really good reason why someone did something that didn't turn out well, because they have prior experience with a very similar media, maybe, and they expect it to work like that media. So sometimes I can learn not only new techniques, but I also kind of get to know that artist a little bit better. But I also will put on other people's art videos while I'm working, so it keeps me company. I know some people want like very, very short art videos, which I totally, well, part of me can understand, because it's like, okay, you want to learn how to do whatever you're doing as quickly as possible. You just want the question answered. Ooh, that's a little redder than it swatched originally. It's okay. So I have a few more challenges planned, but I'm interested in hearing man, these are nothing like the caps, how people prefer that content. Okay. Boop, boop. I wish I had a Signo, like a Signo gel pen. For my highlights. Unfortunately, I do not. At least I don't think I do. I could grab some white gouache and do that. Alright. Then the blue-green. Okay. There we go. So, I think... No, I don't want that. I want this. I think I am going to step away and go dig up that white gouache and return just to add a few highlights here and there, but otherwise I think we are pretty much finished. Guys, it's time to fully wrap this up. I've got some white gouache, I've got a paintbrush, and I've got a cup of water, and I'm just going to use the gouache to add a few white details here and there. this has been a really fun challenge. And it went a lot better than I expected it to. Oh no, I got gouache all over my hands now. So I got to be careful where I put my hands. There was definitely a few elements of challenge. It wasn't the easiest thing, but it also wasn't overly hard. And I was able to use a lot of skills that I've developed doing my marker reviews to sort of make this as successful as possible. As a challenge, I think coloring with Sharpies is fine, especially if you already have some, just sort of sitting around the house for whatever reason. It can be kind of a fun exercise, a fun challenge, but I would not use Sharpies as a replacement for other types of markers, and certainly not as a replacement for artist grade alcohol markers. The fumes are a little bit intense, and I certainly would not recommend Sharpies as a substitute if you're buying for a younger person, an elderly person, or someone with sensitivities, because the fumes are pretty intense, definitely as intense as other types of alcohol markers. So in that regard, they're not really a good replacement either. I found that they handle sort of like a hybrid between alcohol markers and water-based markers, and definitely have their own challenges that are kind of unique. So I feel like I was able to do a successful job because I am familiar with water-based markers, very inexpensive alcohol markers, since I've done so many reviews, and also, you know, artist grade. So I definitely feel like that was a contributing factor to being able to successfully... Ugh, there's still some makeup on my thing from my last challenge. I feel like that was definitely a contributing factor to the success of this challenge. And it was fun to be able to pull together a lot of what I've learned over the years. Mess that up a little bit and sort of make it work for me. So I hope you guys enjoyed this challenge video, and I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel for not only future challenge videos, but also for more alcohol marker reviews and tutorials, and for watercolor reviews and tutorials, as well as other art supplies. And I hope you'll consider clicking that little bell, and that way you'll be notified when I update. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry because I kind of want to go back in and that might not work super well, but we'll find out. I kind of want to go back in with that lighter green and fix, because I kind of went over a bit more than I wanted to. So I want to fix that. All right, that's had a chance to dry, and I'm just going to go over it. And it looks like it will indeed go over it without too much pickup. And go over that over there. And that over here, and this too. Of course, it did end up so I'll tighten that up a little bit, and that way it'll look more intentional. Because that is the best thing to do when we make a mistake, is make it look like it was an on purpose. Okay, so I think we are about done. It was a pleasure hanging out with you guys today, and I hope to see you again really soon. I would absolutely recommend you avoid using Sharpie markers for your nicer art, especially if you value your lungs. And if you want to try this challenge, I did use 2 sets, and I did use colors from both sets pretty regularly. I used the basic 24 set that you can find almost anywhere. I got mine at Walmart. And I also used the 21 color new set. And like I explained in the beginning of the video, if you're going to go in that direction, I would recommend, rather than buying both of those separate sets, I would recommend you just get some of the individual sets that are available at like Michael's, or I would recommend you go to like Office Max and pick them up open stock there to get the colors that you need, rather than investing in a bunch of colors that you might not use. So it was cool hanging out with you guys. I have more challenges coming up, and I hope to see you again really soon. Bye guys!